a recording available after. So just make sure everybody's still okay with this because we're about to go live. You may have a little pop-up.
Yeah, it says we're live here now.
Great.
So, okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And first items are the approval of the agenda. But we first start off with the land acknowledgement, and I believe, Amy, you volunteered this week.
Yes, I did volunteer to do the land acknowledgement for this meeting. So I would like to start out just to say that I am very grateful for this time in this place, that we do take a minute in meetings to do this and to honor the people that have been here since time immemorial. And there is so much to the truth and reconciliation work that as individuals that we can't take on. There's a lot of systemic and structural change that's led by the federal and provincial governments and municipal governments, but as an individual, there's not a lot. But this is one important thing that we can do and should do. So in the spirit of that, Canmore, where we're hopefully all sitting today, is on Treaty 7 territory, and it's the traditional territory of the Stony Dakota, which are comprised of the Bearspaw, the Wesley, and the Chiniki First Nations, and also the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is the Piikani, the Siksika, and the Kainai. It's also home to the Métis Region 3 of Alberta, and that's within the historical Métis, Northwest Métis homeland. Thank you. And so as we had discussed, for those of us who were at our last meeting, we discussed the idea of rotating the land acknowledgement. So Ralph, you might have missed this, and because I know you came late to the last one, and Gareth, you weren't here. So, you know, with the spirit of us all participating in this. So I guess what I'm asking for right now is if anybody had volunteers to take on the land acknowledgement for the March meeting.
Yeah, I'll jump in and do that.
Awesome. Okay. So Bob will do that one. And then I guess, Bob, over to you for the approval of the agenda.
Okay, so let's, everybody has got a copy of the agenda either on the screen or on their desks. So if anybody has any changes to the agenda or not.
I actually do. Because Kevin is going to be joining us a little bit late, I propose that we move the election of the vice chair a little bit further down, either after the unfinished business or the updates, depending on when he can come, just so he can participate in that.
Okay. Any other changes? Motion to accept the agenda. We need a seconder for this, Amy?
I believe so. Well, there's Ralph.
Okay. Looks like everybody's approved it anyways.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, a question of clarification from Gareth. I haven't seen the terms of reference for this committee lately. I just want to know if I'm a voting member or not.
I believe you're ex officio. As you're representing the Biosphere Institute, is that correct?
I certainly am.
Yeah.
But ex officio can mean a couple of things. What about the voting rights or privileges or whatever? Do you happen to know?
Well, just from my experience on the committee is that members from attendees from Low Valley or the Biosphere Institute have not normally voted. So,
okay.
That might be something Amy or Caitlin could check into, but I don't even know if there's anything in the terms of reference for the committee that actually addresses the Biosphere Institute at all. So.
And from my seat, that actually seems very appropriate. As an observer status, or whatever the case may be, happy to be here. And that makes good sense to me.
Well, I think we're going to be putting the Biosphere Institute to good use
Nice.
on this committee. So your participation is much appreciated. Okay. Now that we've approved the agenda, approval of the minutes for the last meeting, which was December 13th. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review that. And are there any changes to the minutes? Seeing none, could I have a motion to approve the minutes? Could I have a second? Yes, could I have a motion to approve the minutes? Jeff? Could we have a seconder, please?
I can do that, Glynis.
Okay, Glynis, all in favor? Okay, approved. And did you want to go with the introductions right now, Amy?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just going to jump in on your last point with Gareth. You are listed on the website under all the committees as the, not a member, but as the Biosphere Liaison.
Sure.
So that's how the terminology is currently on our website.
Sure. And it makes sense to me again that as a liaison, I am a non-voting member. Quite comfortable with that if folks are.
Okay. Thank you. That's right. Yeah, so we can move on to introductions. So let's start with Caitlin, and then maybe we can do just a round of everybody, because not all of us have met Gareth, and of course, none of us have met you.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Happy to be with the town of Canmore. As Amy said, my name is Caitlin. So it's Caitlin Van Gaal, and I'm the Supervisor of Environment and Sustainability with the town of Canmore. I started here on January 24th, so I am on week 3 of my job here. So forgive me if I take a little while to get my feet and my bearings here. But I came from the city of Spruce Grove, where I'd worked for the past 8 years as the environmental advisor. So Spruce Grove is located just about 15 minutes west of Edmonton. Prior to that, I worked as an environmental consultant doing remediation reclamation work in the oil and gas industry. And then prior to which I had done my master's at the University of Western Ontario, spent a couple of years overseas teaching English, then did my undergrad at St. FX in Nova Scotia, and I'm originally from Prince Edward Island. And PEI is where I call home, and that's where my family all lives, my parents and my siblings. Yeah, so it's just a little bit about me, and I'm happy to be here and looking forward to getting to know each and every one of you. So I'll hand it back to Amy to move to the next round of, I guess, Gareth, probably, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, probably. That sounds good. Yeah, okay, I'll boss people around. So Gareth, please introduce yourself. Can everybody see everybody now? I stopped screen sharing as per Gareth's suggestion to let you guys all see each other. I'll bring the agenda back up when we need it.
Sure. So pleased to be here. Gareth Thompson, Executive Director of the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley. I'm a long-term resident of Canmore. I moved here in 1989, and I was actually on, interestingly, or to me anyway, interestingly, I was on Canmore Town Council from 1992 through 95. I actually, that council was the first one to create an EARC, I'll have you know, and just like Jeff, I was the councillor, and I actually stayed with that committee for all 3 years of the term. Back then it was 3 years, not 4 years. So I'm just entering. I just started in January. Interestingly, so the Biosphere offices are upstairs in the seniors hall, and as it turns out, that's also where council used to meet. So I'm currently sitting as executive director. My office is that seat is about 3.5 feet from where I used to sit for 3 years. Right beside Martin Buckley, and just a kind of an easy shoulder tap from Bert Dick, the mayor at the time. And so the Biosphere is all about, we have the mission of empowering community leadership to solve environmental problems. Staff of 5, really wonderful staff of really thoughtful folk. We've got a board that is kind of this awesome, revitalized and rejuvenated group. We're going into strategic planning over the next few days. It's been my pleasure to serve the community over the past 30 odd years that I've been here, and some of them have been very odd years, as sort of somebody interested in the environmental. I've always been an environmental professional. I was the executive director of a group that did environmental education for 15 years. Before that, with the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society as their education director. Before that, I worked in the provincial building as one of the Kananaskis country environmental educators, a job that's now taken by Vicky Perkins and Andrea Barnes. So I'm really excited about what the future might hold. I have to say that I am it will be an easy job, quite frankly, to sit on the sidelines with and sort of look for ways to bring additional value to the work of the EARC and the town of Canmore with Amy and Caitlin, and in fact this new council and Jeff and some of the wonderful legacy there. There's a ton of great stuff, and I'm very open to suggestions now or later for anyone on the Zoom call here on what we might do to kind of play a bigger game and make the world a better place from an environmental point of view as we deliver on mission. I'll drop my email into the chat, but of course you got it through the invitations and so on. And I'm very happy to see how I can help serve this committee and particularly in the town of Canmore in general. The only other thing I'll mention is our scope includes the MD of Bighorn and indeed Banff, and looking forward to kind of rocking and rolling and seeing if we can how much above our weight we can actually punch as an organization.
I love it. That's great. Thank you, Gareth. And I'll just say a quick word about myself. I mean, I know you all. I'm Amy. So I am the climate change coordinator at town. So I will be staying in that role. I was acting liaison for IRC while Caitlin was being hired. So I'll drop back out. Caitlin will be the liaison, and I will participate as needed. Like if we're, specific climate change related stuff, I will show up. I'll show up to support Caitlin if she needs it, especially in the transition. But just thanks, it was good times. But passing you off. But for today too, I'll just help facilitate. All right, Bob.
Well, I'm Bob Reyna. I'm the current chair of the committee here. Part-time resident in Canmore since 2002, full-time since 2016. My background is environmental consulting, a lot of regulatory and environmental assessments up in the north, primarily in the Northwest Territories, but all throughout Western Canada. I had my own consulting company for about 20 years prior to retiring, and then I did some consulting work as well. My last project before I retired was the senior project manager for the Stony, Dakota flood recovery program. If you can remember, back in 2013, the floods were quite devastating to the housing on the reserve. And so that was my last, my swan song for my my consulting career. And I think I've been on this committee for, I'm just finishing my second term, excuse me. And
He's getting all choked up. That's beautiful.
I'm getting all choked up. It's so emotional. But yeah, that's who I am. So.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, Jeff.
Oh, okay. Jeff Ma, first-time town councillor, and I've been in the Valley since about almost 10 years. And my partner, Hillary Young, she works for Yellowstone Yukon. She does some good work there. So I hear a lot of environmental conversations around the kitchen table all the time. We just came off of strat planning. For a little bit of background, this council is an environmentally motivated council. So this is I think I would echo Gareth's statements that, we could probably get some stuff done, and that motivation and will to do stuff is there. And so, and I also just like to say, going back to MCO and Caitlin there, is that earlier in my first term, a couple months ago, we were looking at the various committees, and we were like going through all the applicants for the various committees. And it's highly impressive, the caliber of people that are on this committee. Yeah, the level of intelligence and experience, it's daunting. So, we're in a great group. I just want to thank you guys all. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Glynis.
Yeah, I'm Glynis Carling. This is my second year on IRC. I came to Canmore as a part-time resident about 10 years ago, and been a full-time for about 4-ish, plus a bit. I'm a chemical engineer by training, retired now, and about half of my career was environmental related in the oil and gas industry, with kind of a specialization on air quality and greenhouse gas climate change issues, and a lot of emphasis on consensus decision making and multi-stakeholder work. So yeah, and I echo Jeff's comments based on my 1 year with the committee. I think we have the potential to add a lot of value to the town, and hope to continue that this year.
Thank you, Glynis. Waverly.
Thank you, Waverly Birch. My partner and I moved here last March, so we're coming up on a year. He is working for the cold water lab in town, and I work, we just changed my title because we hired someone who is more focused on the regulatory work. So I'm a planning ecologist with what today became a 4-person consulting company. We work just exclusively for Indigenous nations, supporting Indigenous leadership in navigating complex major projects. So my role there falls really between the implementation of ecological science, different knowledge systems, Indigenous science, into policy and decision-making processes. So that's a lot of fun, and I've learned a ton from all of our clients there that I hope I can help to bring forward here. My background's a lot in wetlands, different ecosystems. I've worked across the country and then have moved to Canmore with the distinct advantage that almost all our friends here are some kind of environmental professional. So I've learned a lot very quickly. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ken.
Got to turn my mic on first. Hi, everyone, and welcome to those new members. It's going to be fun. This is my second term on the committee. First term, it was from frying pan into the fire with the Three Sisters management plan sort of thing, and it was quite a challenge. My background is I'm a registered professional forester out of BC. I worked out of Prince George for 35 years, actually 45 years. I was with the government for 35 years and in forestry. Then I contracted for another 10 years where I did a number of things, including carbon offsets. I did recreational, I was executive director. I did a number of things that kind of enjoyed. Now I'm a ski instructor at Lake Louise, so it's my retirement gig now. And I quite enjoy that. I've been here in Canmore for about 3 years now, and feeling very comfortable being part of town. I like being engaged in the committees and with the community. So that's who I am. And I'm young at heart, by the way.
Thanks, Ken. Ralph.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ralph Walicki. I'm a part-time resident in Canmore for the last 10 years, and been on the committee since I looked it up, but it was the fall of 2017. So coming on 5 years. I've seen the committee go through different changes and some of the challenges and challenging projects that we've taken on over the years. In terms of my background, I'm an environmental engineer by training. I run my own consulting that deals with primarily risk assessment and verification as it pertains to operational risks and environmental risks in the natural resource sectors. I've worked across Canada, Mexico, and the US, and North Africa, and I've sat on some other regional environmental advisory committees in my past, about 20 plus years ago in Ontario. Yeah, kind of bringing some of that context and background to the committee, and you know, with our sensitive environment in the Canmore area and the Bow Valley, it's a great great area to contribute to, and I value that as well. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. And Kevin, glad you could make it. Yeah, if you don't mind introducing yourself, because Gareth is our Biosphere. You might have missed at the beginning. So we have Caitlin Van Gaal, the new Environment and Sustainability Supervisor. So she'll be the staff liaison. And Gareth Thompson is the ED from the Biosphere, and they have a seat on the committee as well. So
great. You can hear me okay? Great. I'm also, my background is environmental planning. Spent a number of years with the Alberta government and Alberta Environment, and in a number of areas, environmental assessment, water conservation, and finally in the recycling area, which took me into another gig with the Alberta Recycling Management Corporation. I worked as a director there of involved with tire recycling, electronics recycling, paint recycling. And then the last 10 years of my career, I spent with Stantec Consulting as an environmental biologist, and did a lot of work with reviewing EIAs, and then got into the urban group with managing some projects with urban development, the environmental aspects, regulatory aspects of the engineering components. So varied career. In the past, I've been a member of the board of directors of the Recycling Council of Alberta, and I spent a few years on a similar environmental advisory committee with the City of Edmonton. My wife and I are part-time residents. We managed to buy a condo in Canmore, lovely Canmore, in a couple of years ago, and we hope to sort of come down the road from Edmonton and become permanent one of these days. So that's all for now. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. I know that we've done intros before, but I appreciate you guys doing them again for the new members. And just a reminder, as Jeff said, the talented and very experienced crew of people. So we are able to actually keep the agenda as is and move on to the election of the vice chair. So I might just leave the screen share off for now. But Bob, can you lead this part?
Sure. I did a little bit of pre-work for this item, and I did find two potential candidates for vice chair, and that would be Glynis and Ralph. And I'm not sure how we want to do this, but if maybe we do rock, paper, scissors between Glynis and Ralph. But we have two potential candidates for the vice chair, and Ken also threw his hat in the ring if there was no desire for anybody else to take on the role as well. So I don't think we'll have a problem getting a vice chair tonight. It's just a question of how do we go about this. So.
I'm happy to cede the position to Ralph if if you're willing, Ralph. I do also chair the library board, so I don't actually need to take on something else, but only if you're available and happy with that.
I'd love to do it if you give me the opportunity to take that on and support that for sure. That's but we can do rock, paper, scissors.
Well, I guess then if all are in favor of Ralph being our vice chair, could we maybe have a show of hands then? Okay, I think you're press ganged into it, Ralph. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That would be easier done than said. I guess we can move on to unfinished business, and I think I'll let Amy lead this one.
For sure. So as per the minutes, there were a couple outstanding questions that I needed to get back to everybody on. So the first one was from Glynis, and it was about what strategy or kind of what's guiding our work on drinking water quality, the town of Canmore, because we have many strategies for other environmental work, but hadn't specified what that was. So there isn't a specific town of Canmore strategy for that. We follow, as all municipalities in Alberta do, Alberta Environment and Parks set the drinking water quality standards and requirements. So that's what we meet. So does that answer the question that you had originally from last month?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that sets the minimum standard, and the town is not looking to do anything more than that. So that answers the question.
Okay, great. And then the other, oh, sorry, Jeff.
Thanks. I do believe there's a project, a capital project that admin is taking on this year, and I think it's looking at just the security of the water supply that we have down in the valley. And so some of the water comes in off of the, up high, off Whiteman's Pass for the pump house, and the other part, there's an aquifer down on the flats of the valley. And so there's, I believe there's like an investigative report to be done just to see what's going on. Because, we have gas stations and various other things along the flats of the valley, say on Bow Valley Trail and stuff. And so they just want to make sure that everything's okay. I don't think it's done. I don't think it's flagged as like, like imminent danger or issue. Is the sort of thing this would be prudent to like double check and make sure what's going on, because, there is more proposed future development down there, and just see what's going on there. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
The other question was if there was anything in the existing ERC bylaw or EIS policy that dictated timeline required for the review, and that I couldn't see anything. So I looked through the different documents and there was nothing stated. The other question was if the original request to update the EIS policy was limited to climate change impacts or greenhouse gas emissions, and it was specific only to that. When it was originally brought up. And then last question was about wildlife discussions, and if we could have Nick from the Biosphere come in and advise at future meetings, because Gareth, for your background, there was a discussion around off-leash dogs, fruit trees, and those issues, and really we wanted to hear from people with the expertise in wildlife to advise on that. So, and Gareth said yes, we could invite Nick to a future meeting.
Hard yes.
Great. So those were the outstanding questions that were remaining for the last meeting. And then the next part of the unfinished business was getting your input for the Keep Wildlife Alive campaign. So that is it's called the Social Norms campaign. So that is, I'm sure you may have discussed it with Lori in past meetings, but it's of a social marketing, social norms campaign. It was developed, led by the town of Banff, but we kind of jumped on and gave a little bit of funding to that so that we could utilize it here as well in Canmore. And so I'm just gonna screen share this so you guys know what we're talking about. And what I was hoping to understand from you is to get some input on this. So you probably have seen signs that look like this around town. So a lot, and Caitlin's going to be leading this work. And a lot of it is led by the town of Banff, but it's really, a lot of it is signage based. And part of the intent is to have these signs in areas where there may be bylaw infractions to help support the bylaw officers in it, that they can point to them and let people know that this is going to be expected behavior. They were at Quarry Lake last year. There was a few of the giant signboards just outside the Civic Center. There were some on the river trail. And the intention is that we move them around to keep it kind of fresh. And so in planning for this year, some of them went away just because of the weather and we didn't want them to get too damaged, but they will be coming back out. So a couple of these cougar snack signs are currently, actually we moved them from Quarry Lake out to an area in Three Sisters at the request of one of the bylaw officers, because she was seeing some infractions and wanted to have them out there as reminders and to help support her work. So that's currently where those ones are, and the other ones have been moved inside. So there's the cougar snack signs. Some of them are the kind of my waist height A-board signs, we call them. And then the other ones are the very tall, kind of freestanding ones that come in a very large wooden rack. And then, yeah, the bear trap one is the other one. This is another one. And then to do with the feeders as well. So we just wanted to take some time and get your input, potential locations where we could plan out the strategy for this year of where these things could go. So I'd just like to open it up, and if anybody has any thoughts about sign placement, I'd love to hear it.
So hey, as a biosphere guy, I just have a quick question. It's not exactly on the point on the question you just asked us, Amy, so apologies for that. But so, and it's wonderful that the municipalities are jumping into this space. I think that's really great. And then there's this, just from my background, and possibly for others as well, could you just sort of help me understand, there's a whole bunch of organizations, Friends of Kananaskis Country, Biosphere, Town of Canmore with this initiative that can be involved in the education of folks. There's precious few that can be involved in the enforcement and in fact, the ticketing, I suppose, to put it baldly. And I'm wondering, so help me understand town bylaw versus Alberta provincial parks. Who does the most of that work, or is only one of the parties able to issue tickets, and how you guys think about educational signage and enforcement going together?
For sure, I can give a little bit of an answer. It's not going to be to the depth that it deserves because this has never been my file. I covered it briefly when Lori had left and in the space before Caitlin came. So. But what I can say is that town bylaw staff can ticket for off-leash dogs. That is written in the bylaw that they can do that. And they can also ticket for letting fruit accumulate on trees. I'd have to look at the wording again, but there is specific wording about fruit tree infraction. So those are two areas that town staff can do that. You know, we had a discussion last time about that can be complicated because the bylaw staff are hard to get and they take a lot of training to do that. They typically have an education first approach before ticketing. So they will give warnings often for first infractions before they go into the ticketing. I cannot speak to the provincial aspect of it though. So if other people have more knowledge of that than me, or if there's some follow-up questions, or it's a good question in terms of the WildSmart education. Thanks. I also know very little about the background of the Banff campaign. I know it was well researched and they did a lot of work and they hired a consultant to come up with the campaign. But in terms of how the campaign fits within a larger education program, I do not know the answer to that.
Thanks, Amy. And to more directly to your question, if I heard you correctly, bylaw in the past have asked for placement of specific signs in areas where there's infractions, and I think you used the example of Three Sisters. So that's one of the ways in which those decisions are made. Is that correct?
Yeah, they help inform that as well.
Yes.
Okay, so we have Jeff, Glynis, and Kevin, and just in the order of my screen, I'll pick Jeff.
Great. A quick question, Amy. For this campaign, how much of it do you feel is targeted towards residents? For example, I see this one like the Kukersacks is living in the Bow Valley. And how much of this is also meant to target incidental tourism as well? If we can, I'm just trying to understand the two audiences between the two, that might inform some of my input on where we can put these things.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I don't know the answer to that. Again, not being involved in the formation of the campaign. Yeah, I'm just looking at it because some, barbecues, obviously, bird feeders, fruit trees. A lot of it seems quite resident focused. And then, of course, you have the general litter and the off-leash dogs, which could be both. But I don't know when they were doing their target audience development, if they kind of had done a specific split.
Okay, yeah. Have any of these gone into EP at Elevation Place? At times?
I don't believe so. I know they just came out last year, and the locations that I knew about were the ones I mentioned, like the River Trail, the Civic Center, and Quarry Lake.
Yeah, if I had to add a venue, I would recommend spending like maybe putting some time out there at Elevation Place, just because between the library and the people that use like the rec facilities, there's a lot of traffic, like a lot
Right.
of traffic.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
Whether that goes inside or goes outside, I think that's a good spot. I think also, you know, playing on that, the Canmore Rec Center where the rink is and the gymnastics club, that could also be a spot to spend some time with that signage. But I do think like EP is like a big place to get that in. And just curious on the sunny side of the valley, out by, say, for example, the hockey rink, and people are walking in towards that region. I feel sunny side of the valley could probably use some sign representation too, because it doesn't sound like it gets as
like,
much.
Kind of either side of the Cougar Creek kind of walkway.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
even
Like
you're
right by the
crossing
hockey
the
rink.
bridge and you start going up before you even get to the hockey rink, you know, there's a lot of traffic spots there too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And I guess too, if you guys have specific questions about the campaign, like we can report those back at a future meeting as well. These are good. I mean, the question about tourist versus resident is a good one. We can note down. Okay, Glynis.
I guess it's a little bit similar, but I was thinking in the summer market days, it would target both residents and visitors, and then places where bylaw or where there have been complaints about food waste. I mean, along the river paths, I often see people dumping these beside garbage cans, as well as at Quarry Lake. So I think the bylaw folk have probably a lot of insight into those sort of problem areas. That's what my thoughts.
Those are great. Thank you. Kevin. Kevin, you're muted.
I'm sorry. We're up in Three Sisters, and I saw the latest sign up there, and a couple months ago, and it was great because we've seen them on the river trail. I was thinking that maybe the off-leash dog parks. We have one up in Three Sisters, and I know there's one down by the down the valley by the heliport, right near there. Just to remind those of us with dogs that we should be careful and take the appropriate, the appropriate rules. But the wiener dog is great. Whoever came up with that idea, kudos.
Thanks. Yeah, I like it. I know it received a lot of love and hate. A lot of people were kind of offended by it as well.
Really?
Yeah. Okay, Bob.
Yeah, you probably don't have this information, but I'm just curious as to whether or not there's any studies being done as to how the signage or this program is being received. The second question I have is how many signs are there around for distribution? And then my third comment would be, I think this is something that we may want to deal with at another meeting where we can get into this, maybe spend an hour on this, and maybe get bylaw to present, and maybe get some input from Gareth's group as well, as to how we as an advisory group can come up with a way to take a look at the off-leash dog issue as a fairly, what I think is a fairly serious problem in the valley, and then maybe come up with some ways to present some recommendations to council as to actual action regarding the off-leash dog problem. And this program with the signage being one of the items that we should be looking at.
Great, thanks, Bob. So having more dedicated time at a future meeting, involve bylaw, kind of a more holistic discussion about it. And noted, I would have to get back to you on the numbers. It's not a huge amount that we have, maybe like 6 or so signs that we have. And then in terms of the data, we'd have to get back to you, because that would be information that like we
I think
have from BAMF.
I think if we set this as an agenda item for a future meeting and then try to get ourselves informed with whoever has some expertise in the area and give us, some of those numbers if they can as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I just want to acknowledge that Whitney's joined us. So Whitney is going to help us through kind of our next discussion around the EIS policy discussion and speak to some of the town's reconciliation work. So we do have some updates scheduled first. So we could put the updates towards the end, because we had kind of played with the agenda a little bit because we knew that Whitney was involved in the strategic planning discussion and may not be able to join us till 5. So just to recognize her time here.
Amy, you can stick to the agenda schedule.
Are you sure?
Yeah, you don't have to move it around because of me.
Okay. You need some.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll stick to it. So I have another couple minutes on this discussion and then we'll move up to the updates. So I'm just trying to see whose hands were still up for the wildlife discussion. So I have Waverly, then Gareth, then Jeff.
Okay, I think I might have been the last one. So if anyone wants to go before, I'm okay with that. I was just wondering, I think similarly to that idea of a larger discussion about this, I think it would be good to know how some of the off-leash areas were delineated and like why those were picked and why maybe the connections between weren't. I'm specifically thinking of Quarry Lake, because where I see the biggest problem with dogs off leash is like around the Nordic Center, obviously, but there's a large dog park and then there's that little one back by the pond. And it's very tempting to walk that little trail loop around, right? And tons of people do. So I wonder if there's even just a design problem there that maybe needs to be addressed to keep people's dogs, contained, even like a short fence or something along those paths that's wildlife friendly. I don't really know. And I'd be looking to see what maybe would work there, because it doesn't seem like people are going to put their dogs on leash there unless there's some sort of difference.
Right, thank you. And yeah, there's some history for sure and different attempts that have been tried, but we can table that for another one. Thank you. Okay, so I think, what did I say? Gareth, then Jeff, and I know Ralph, was your hand up from before, or? Okay, we'll go Gareth, Jeff, Ralph, and then we'll move on to updates.
Sure. So look, this is core business for the Biosphere Institute, and I'm happy to kind of bring and convene any kind of discussion that this committee wants. It might be useful to help frame it. So Bob, for example, was talking about kind of keeping dogs on leash, which is very much the theme of this first sign with a hot dog here. But there's more to it than that, as you'll recall, as you scroll down, with garbage, with fruit trees. There's a bunch of things that people in town could and should do to help keep wildlife safe, and so may I propose that might be a useful frame. I need to hear a little bit more about, just so we can prepare ourselves for what it is Nick and I might do and how we might serve this committee best with a presentation or a conversation. And then the other, it's hard to say wildlife without talking about the other imperatives on the drivers of wildlife. For example, recreation is a massive. I know this. Everyone on the call here cares about wildlife, and so some kind of core behaviors I would suggest might include our work in the body of work to help make sure that recreationalists don't completely blow it for wildlife and make our wildlife corridors kind of non-functional. So there's much to talk about, and I guess I would say perhaps you and I, Amy, unless we have time to do it now, but we might just sort of wrestle this to the ground and try and figure out how best to serve the interests of the committee, this EARC, with a presentation from the Biosphere and set the table for success there.
Gareth, if I might just suggest that maybe you and I could meet offline in the next week or two and maybe try and come up with some sort of a formulation for that.
Love it. Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you. Jeff.
Yep, I think those are all great ideas. And taking a deeper look at this, definitely let's make sure Nick from WildSmart is there for this stuff. I know I've spoken with Nick before, and he's definitely had some frustrations about certain pieces of how can we drive the message further, et cetera. And I think Nick would be invaluable to have along, as Gareth has mentioned. And just like rewinding one topic, I think another location, maybe it's been off of top of mind, there will be another pedestrian mall happening this year for this summer. So I think getting some signage up on the main street where people are walking around could be helpful as well too, just in our sweet spot. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, and then Ralph, and then we can move on to updates.
Oh, yeah, no, just picking up on the highly frequented areas. My suggestion may be the area of Millennium. It's more seasonal, but around Millennium Park and the baseball diamonds and so forth, where you get a lot of food leftovers and still kind of borders onto that sensitive area to the east of the sports park there too, plus the communities that are coming in and visitors as well. So just a thought on that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thank you for those, and those will help us in the short term. And then we've really got some good, fodder for the kind of deeper discussions. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And then the next thing on the menu, is council update from Councillor Jeff Ma.
Okay, council updates for ERC. I know last meeting we talked a bit about the train, Banff Calgary train, and that's just still chugging along in the background. Not much has really occurred that we've seen. I believe our mayor, Sean Krausert, and a couple of other mayors in this Bow Valley corridor region, along with like Banff and Calgary, they did send a letter in just showing, their cautious support of where this is at, that how, more information is required, and they'd like to see more to kind of chug along with that sort of stuff. I know in my current personal deals, I've heard concerns from various citizens about the train, asking about questions, what's going on with feasibility study that was budgeted for, and perhaps, the mighty Miss Smithers could like hop in a bit there too. But, right now we're on a bit of a wait and see to see what's going on. And Whitney, please correct me if I'm wrong. Other things going on, CRPS, which is the school board, they have their proposed project on the LGMS lands. Okay, and so that's currently proposed. There is 80 market units, 20 affordable housing units, 20 staffing units. So 120 units, high density project right down there in South Canmore. That has passed first reading. So it will be going to a public hearing. I believe March 1st is the Tuesday. I'd have to double check, but it is going to public hearing. There was, some community sentiment, hey, like this is where the elk live, et cetera, et cetera. So we might hear some of that sort of stuff, but that is going to first reading. Another big project coming up down the pipe. This is a few months down the road before we start seeing their full thing for first reading is the palliative care project. And there's some requests for, changing urban growth boundary. There's definitely some impact being looked at for that habitat patch region. And so that's something I think that will be coming up on the radar as well too. So for example, Waverly, you talk about wetlands stuff, et cetera. That will be, components that I think citizens will bring up stuff about. And that is, I believe, pretty much the updates I've seen from the environmental side of things from council.
Thank you so much. Gareth, how about we hear from you in terms of the biosphere, anything new and exciting that you want to share with this committee?
Thanks. I'm going to keep my powder dry to use an extremely inappropriate metaphor for this group. Anyway, but in part the thing of it is we are just diving into strategic planning. So anything I might tell you about cool stuff we're doing now may well be preempted by even more cool stuff that we decide to do once the board has had its say. The one thing I will mention is as a little tidbit of kind of new approaches. I pitched the board successfully, as it turns out, at its last board meeting about Biosphere taking on a new role for our organization, which is the notion of convening, making the right conversations happen in the hope of accelerating environmental action. And so the first approach we'll take is to look at convening, in essence, following on the heels of a really cool meeting that was held almost 2 years ago now by the Banff Canmore Community Foundation. around climate, and we will. So we are intent upon, and I'm currently fundraising hard to try and create the capacity for a multi-sector convening of our community, and by which I mean not just Canmore, but also Banff and the MD of Bighorn, around climate action, with the hope that different sectors like hoteliers and industry and businesses and NGOs would get together, compare notes with one another, but also within each sector, talk about how they might accelerate climate action in their, in their particular realm, and with the hope of egging one another on and accelerating climate action in town. I have it on no less an expert than Amy Fournier with the town of Canmore has told me that just 4% of all the greenhouse gas emissions emitted within the town of Canmore can be tagged to municipal operations. And the other 96% is you and I living in our houses and going about our lives and driving around in businesses and et cetera, et cetera. And so it's our hope that we can get after that vast majority, the 96%, in conversation, coming up with a shared agenda, chasing after really kind of a community think about this, which might take, if successful, might pick up where the Banff Canmore Community Foundation left off with its one successful, although successful initiative. We only had one meeting, so it started and things looked good. Let's keep the ball rolling. Let's breathe fresh life into that and see if we can't get more climate impacts and climate action happening, with many results, including the fact that people, because they can do something about this seemingly, this huge and challenging societal issue, can feel hope and can feel hopeful for the future because they get to do something. And that's one of the many gifts that action can bring.
Thank you, Gareth. Does anybody have, before we move on, does anybody have any questions for Gareth about that? All right. Not seeing any hands. Maybe just jump in if any of you have some roundtable updates that you would like to share, or shake your head vigorously if you do not. Oh, Jeff.
Just another thing that's recent. County Canmore is also looking at this bylaw 2020-26, and I think this is something that Lori Wissing-Wynn started crafting in the past, and this is a clean energy improvement program. And so the way it works is we're getting funding, some grant funding, and citizens can apply with a project that moves the needle forward for like reducing the GHGs for their home, and then they would get funding for that. And the way that works is they would take that money, they could do the upgrade on their home, and then from there it is paid off as a monthly tax piece. And the interesting thing about that is if they sell the home, like the remaining fees do go to the new homeowner. Right, so it's not the sort of thing where the homeowner themselves has to like capitalize on the project right away and break it even. They could start, do something right now, and then from there move that forward. And so I think with the funding we're looking to get, I think it's approximately 400,000, and I think people can apply for like, I'm just double checking the exact details here, 50,000 for residential for a gig. So obviously there's a lot of homes, and it's not, tons and tons and tons of money, but hopefully it's like a good model start and some people can take advantage of that, and we'll go from there. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Waverly.
This is just a question to tag on to Jeff's updates there. And the fact that we've discussed that a lot of the GHG emissions are not directly from the municipality, it's from people who are out and about. Just wondering, or maybe looking towards if the town has considered regulations on like new buildings and so on. I'm thinking to the examples that recently gas hookups in new buildings have been prohibited in several municipalities. I know the building I live in, that's probably the biggest emitter because everything else is electric here. So for like, we're talking about retrofits, which is great, but are there programs for new buildings that are GHG focused?
I think I'd probably want to see if like Whitney here could like hop in on that stuff, because I haven't seen anything myself yet. Perhaps Ms. Bitters, do you have some insight on that?
Yeah, I don't know, Amy, have you talked about the building code stuff yet? So I think the bit of a bind that we're in as a municipality is really that the building code is, well, it's a national building code, but it's provincial, which is weird, and that's another topic for another day. But it is really the biggest lever we can pull if we're looking at reducing GHG emissions in private sector developments and buildings. And it's a stick, and it's a pretty effective stick. And we are still waiting for the new national building code to be kind of addressed in Alberta and know how the province intends to implement it, I guess. And then from there, Amy's already been working on making sure we've got a capital project that we can kind of be ready for that once we have an idea of where the province is headed, so that we can look at our own municipal bylaws and policies and things like that, and make sure that we can put that into action as soon as possible, taking the fullest advantage of some of the green building requirements that we need in that bylaw or in that building code. Other than that, it's really more of a carrot approach, which is challenging, but we're doing what we can through things like the SEEP bylaw that Jeff mentioned, and other incentives like that. We also have a project underway looking at EV charging stations, community-based this year. Like we have a couple for our EV fleet, and we have some downtown, but then we're also looking at kind of broadening that. So yeah, I'm kind of rambling now, and I just spent a whole day with all of council. Jeff, I don't know how you're still awake. I might have strayed a bit. Yeah. So I think like in terms of that big lever that we can pull, it's really waiting with bated breath to see what happens with that national building code, and then from there, really relying on more of the incentive-based approaches that, I touched on. Amy, I don't know if I left anything out there.
No, I would just say like our big challenge that we have is jurisdictional authority over that. And a lot of the cities that do things like say that you can't hook up gas, and the Vancouvers and Edmontons and everywhere, they have powers that we do not have under their city charters. So that's why there's kind of seemingly a difference there, because we basically have to follow Alberta building code. So that's why, as Whitney talked about, like our biggest opportunity is an aggressive national model energy code and having it adopted in Alberta. And we're just kind of waiting for that. It's supposed to come down soon. And then we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see what Alberta is going to do. And once we know, then we can start thinking, is that going to be enough, or do we need to go down the road of incentives?
Understood. Just one follow-up on incentives, community EV charging. Would that then be looking to national programs like the NRCan grants and so on? Like I think it's SREP, SREP.
Yeah, the big thing is there is some funding right now, but it's really for charging on municipal land. So that's why one of my projects this year is an EV charging strategy, because I mean there's public charging, but even more important is at home charging, followed by kind of at work charging, because people can't buy an EV if they have to go up the road to the parking lot every time they want to charge it. So enabling at home charging. So one, I'm kind of waiting to see what happens with building code with this. I mean, the federal government has some pretty lofty ambitions with EV charging, so I'm curious to see. Although I'm a bit worried that it won't be, if having a level 2 charger, or at least level 2 enabled outlet, will be mandatory in all parking areas. That's my dream. And if not, then part of us is looking at that, because public charging is kind of secondary to at home.
Yeah, if you wanted to follow up on that at all, I'm looking at charging for clients for work. So I've heard of some more private programs.
Oh, great.
I'm also an EV driver, our only car.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I will follow up with that later this year when we tackle that. Okay, awesome. Gareth.
Thanks. Just a fast question about process, actually. So, and so Jeff mentioned the grassy redevelopment plan that's coming, that council has given first reading to, and I just need to know, under what circumstances does this committee officially help council by reviewing such proposals? And is there an automatic trigger? Do individual councillors have some flexibility in sending, in asking that council call upon the EARC? I just need, because this group might have some interesting input if invited. That's a question for Jeff, I guess, and Amy.
Maybe Caitlin can help too. I'm actually not too sure. I'll be vulnerable. I have imposter syndrome. I don't know what I'm doing. So
You are the new guy. That's fair.
Like, I'm the new guy.
Do you want me to start on that?
Please. Yes.
Collect. I'll jump in there for you. So really, in terms of the LGMS area redevelopment plan, I think under the ERC bylaw, the development authority, so town administration, would be the body that would request a review by ERC if they found it necessary. And I think this kind of starts to launch us into the discussion that I'm here for. I think generally with an ERC, it would, or with a environmental impact, I'm getting all my acronyms mixed up. It's been a long day, but with an environmental impact statement, it would be more related to subdivision applications or bigger area structure plans, since the Lawrence Grassy plan is really a redevelopment plan for a built-up area. That's really something that administration felt it within their purview to assess and apply the policies in the MVP.
And just having said that, coming up with the other piece, the palliative care proposed project for, I think it's called 800 Canmore. Whitney, is that being forwarded to ERC?
That's gone to ERC already, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of looking at you but I think you guys reviewed that last fall, right?
Yeah, yes, we did.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Does anybody else have any roundtable? We're kind of cutting into our next section here, but if anybody else had any updates that they wanted to share before we move on.
Amy, did you want to say anything about the circular economy?
You know what? I think I'm going to hold
time.
it because we're awaiting that report that was based on that workshop. So I think once we have this like nice tangible piece, we can share that. So great. Okay, and I was just thinking I was going to, but I was like, in the interest of time, I think that one can wait.
So Amy, if I can have 20 more seconds, just in response to something that Waverly said about greenhouse gas emissions and so on. The reason I asked about Grassy maybe coming to this group, it's not going to, and that's fine. But there are, during that process, it's first reading of an important bylaw, there will be a chance for input. And I, as a private citizen, I'm gonna, I believe that a school quite possibly could do some cool geo-exchange stuff with a group of houses that big that could actually model some good green construction that could be shared with students, because there's some really smart students in that school that could probably benefit from understanding how this is the way the world has to start working, kids, and we're beginning in it with our school. But anyway, that's me off my soapbox. I just wanted to kind of fly that flag real briefly.
Great, thanks, Gareth. Okay, so we have Whitney here. Whitney, thank you for taking the time, especially after you spent all day in the strategic planning session. So Whitney is the general manager of municipal infrastructure. So under Whitney is us, public works, facilities, planning, and engineering. So she's kind of got all the hard portfolios to work on. And also she is one of the, co-lead with Sally on the work of truth and reconciliation that's happening with the town of Canmore.
Yes, yeah. Well, Sally, Cottle, and I are the town liaisons with the Stony and Dakota Nation in advancing some of that work we want to do in partnership with them. But we do have on the truth and reconciliation side, there's a whole committee from across many people at the town who are jumping in and moving some of our work there forward. So I don't want to take credit for that whole portfolio. I've just got a fancy title.
Nice. And so part of the discussion with Whitney is just to talk about what's happening and that work. And it really, I mean, it came from Waverly, I think in our very first meeting, just asking the question of like, what is it that the town is doing in this area? And from the aspect of your work and your concern and seeing a lot of requests come forward to different First Nations group without actually providing much capacity to actually give the information. I don't know if I'm summarizing that correctly, but that is what you had seen. So I don't know if you want to just reiterate that original one.
Yeah, I can touch on that. I've thought about it a bit since. Whitney, I guess if it provides context, I spend a lot of time on the other side of this table where I'm representing First Nation clients predominantly with municipalities. So we're working with several municipalities right now in a different province that are going through official plan review processes. And we're essentially helping to take the pen and write policies from the First Nations, or at least heavily review, and are like very engaged at those early stages. So I do not represent Treaty 7 nations at all. I've attempted to speak with some so far, but I'm fairly new here. So definitely I'm aware of the overwhelm that happens there. Our firm is contracted to like represent several consultation departments. So lots of chatting with municipalities. And the thing that time and time again is the barrier. There's one municipality that's actually talking about traditional ecological knowledge within environmental impact studies, so it felt very relevant. And the barrier there is always like, who is going to provide that and how are they paid, right? Quite often, the First Nations that I work with have to rely on consultants to some degree. We're trying to work ourselves out of a job always to get someone from the nation in that seat, but it's not always possible. And so quite often we see, you know, our proponents providing that funding. Where is it coming from? Not saying the municipality has to, but with the TEK policy, I was really seeing that was the flag for me. It was like, how will someone be funded to be able to participate meaningfully in this? That's my soapbox.
Yeah, so Waverly had asked that question, and it was timely because this committee had put forward the recommendation to include that, and so I wanted to flag that and then bring somebody in to discuss kind of in general like our approach so far and our thoughts. So we could get into that now, and then the other aspect is just having a broader discussion about the EIS policy and the work involved in the proposed or the requested changes and kind of our desire, taking all of that information that I kind of gathered from you and the timeline and such, and taking that back and then trying to chew on it, because it's hard, and that's why it hasn't moved forward, is because there's a lot of implications there and there's a lot of work that needs to go into that. And you know, as we were having internal discussions, there's more and more questions came up and more concerns, and there's actually quite a bit of risk to some other work and some other efforts that is kind of rolled up into potentially making these changes. So I just wanted to kind of also with Whitney here, because she can guide us, because she's looking at it from the kind of the top level and being responsible for planning as well, has really unique insight into this that I don't have. I'm just kind of almost taking a step back too and saying, like, let's revisit what the intention is of some of these changes and what we're trying to do, and make sure that this is the best way to do it, or if are there other ways that we could go about getting what it is we're trying to achieve, and then making sure that we're doing it right, and just asking him some of the yeah, like I said, taking a step back and kind of looking at this more holistically. So those are kind of the two things we really wanted to get into this hour with Whitney. So I don't know if it makes sense. Whitney, just if you could just speak in general terms, maybe we could start out with the truth and reconciliation work of the town, and just in general terms of that journey and what we're doing and where we're at and what the hope is, and kind of your feelings on it. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, okay. So it has been, I really appreciated, Waverly, the kind of background and context you provided to this. So thank you for that. And it struck me as you were speaking that I think the work you're doing, or the work that you have kind of have some involvement with or knowledge of, is probably many steps ahead of where we are with the Stony Dakota right now. One thing that has really become apparent to me, so I've been working along with Sally over the past year on specifically that traditional ecological knowledge assessment, or understanding, I think is a better way to characterize it. What I've come to realize is that really with the Stony Dakota, traditional ecological, I'm giving up on speaking today. Traditional ecological knowledge is a relationship, not a document. And it's hard for me, coming from kind of a Western perspective of, here's a report, here's our analysis, here's the policy that we want, let's go build one of those. And then the Stony Dakota, the representatives that we've been working with have constantly kind of been pulling us back a bit to say, we're not there yet. It's a relationship. There are steps in the relationship that we need to build before we get to that conversation. So it's been very educational and informative for me, and very counter to how I usually think about deliverables and getting work done. So I think inclusion of a traditional ecological knowledge assessment in our bylaw or policies right now is just, it's premature. We're not at the point yet where we have a relationship well enough developed with the Stony Dakota nations that that's something that they feel able to participate in or lead, or whatever that would look like, right? And I think in that also, we need to respect that there are, I would say, many organizations reaching out to Stony Dakota because, you know, truth and reconciliation is big, important work, and it's top of mind for many organizations. And I think that some First Nations are feeling kind of overwhelmed with the desire for other organizations to work with them. So it's very much in mine and Sally's minds work that needs to happen in its own time and in its own way. And if sometimes that means we have to kind of step back and you know, let the Stonies lead on this, then that's what we're going to do, because we need to respect that relationship. So that's really kind of it in a nutshell. The traditional ecological knowledge work is very important to the town and relationship. And we're at the starting point of that relationship, and we need to respect the space and time in which the Stony Dakota nations will come to that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Whitney. And I guess so that's you know, part of the rest of the EIS discussion, because that was one thing that was kind of added on, and that, you know, we need to take time with that. And I think part of the broader conversation and what this work, plus I have there's some questions and discomfort and worries that I had about some of the climate change work and all the other things. It just led to more and more questions. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is just say that, you know, we have a new staff liaison, we have a new council representative, we have new members. I'm newer to the organization. I've only been here for 3 years. Whitney's newer. We have Gareth as our new ED. And luckily you have the historical knowledge of council in 1998. But just to pull back and say, let's just revisit kind of this role of the EIS and IRC reviewing the EIS, and kind of, because we need to take more time with this. So let's just maybe pull back the conversation and kind of understand where it all is coming from. And part of why I'm asking this is just with our discussion last time about the amount of work that was required for you guys and how long it took for a volunteer committee to go through the EIS in that way for the Three Sisters one and the Smith Creek one. It's just like, is this an appropriate thing to be asking for a volunteer committee? And like, what is that role? How has it shifted? I don't know, like Gareth, some of the questions I was thinking, like this committee was originally formed to look at EISs in 1998. And it was very different. Then there was no third-party review that was professionally done. There was no specific staff that were assigned to climate change and sustainability. So maybe it's just some of the historic role and kind of just thoughts in general on the role and this piece, because we seem to be spiraling down this road where we're adding things, but I just wanted to, I don't know, pull the conversation back a little bit, if that makes sense. I don't know, Whitney, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think I'm kind of on the same page. I'm interested in a discussion with the committee on kind of where it is now and where it could be. Because I do, in conversations that I've had with Amy and with Lori last year, I am aware that IRC was feeling that there was feedback from IRC around a couple of things. One related to timelines on reviews, and then another related to the inclusion of climate action, stronger inclusion of climate action in the environmental impact statements. And through those discussions, it really became apparent to me, I think that the landscape has changed since IRC was formed, as Amy has said. We do have the climate action or the climate change and sustainability staff at the town right now. We do use third-party reviews in developing the terms of reference for EISs, and then, well, doing the review of the EIS. And we didn't used to have that. That used to all land on IRC. And I think now, to me, and I will say quite candidly, I've had feedback from some on the industry side that maybe the review that IRC provides is redundant when we have third-party reviewers taking a look at the EISs. The IRC review might not have the weight might not have the weight that it used to have. So I wonder there if, and I think that there is a lot of value in the committee existing, just from the point of view of the importance of climate action in our community, the unique setting that we have the great fortune to live and work and play in. And I would like to hear from this, and I think that in some ways, and I can't speak for, I mean, this is a committee of council, so I'm not intending to speak for council at all here, but I just wonder when I look at the evolution of the kind of administrative focus on sustainability and climate action, and the use of third-party reviews now as a tool, is there a space that IRC could be operating from that is a gap at the town? Because I don't know if the review of the EIS is that gap that it used to be. Could be, I don't know. But I also, I wonder if there's more, it kind of points back to what is IRC, like if you look at the kind of responsibility of IRC or the mandate of it, what could it be doing? And do we need to maybe take a look at changing the bylaw just to kind of point it in a different direction?
So Waverly, you've had your hand up for a bit, so thank you for that.
Yeah. I think that's a really important discussion and have something on it, but just before we get too far, I was wondering, Whitney, if I could just ask you, like when there's a development application or an EIS specifically, do those get sent out to all the Treaty 7 nations as consultation?
No.
Okay. Because I think that might be a gap. So I like sit in a consultation capacity and receive those from even small municipalities. And that's often where it'll be decided like what files have a bearing on treaty rights and interests. So that might be something worth entertaining if that's what the Treaty 7 nations want. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think it kind of comes back to my earlier point about just the development of that relationship.
Yeah.
Because again, I think what we might hear from them is we're not there yet.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess just while I have the mic, I would, yeah, on that one, I had seen a first step too, in some cases, be like even where you just ask proponents to write a little intro in their policy section about treaties, like to make it, you know, you have an EIS, you write about the provincial, like federal, provincial, so on policies, like why aren't treaties included in there? And it just makes it so that it's shown that people have looked into it. So potential recommendation, again, I would say that should go to the Treaty 7 nations. And I've also worked within municipalities that have a really high capacity to review EISs, like very strong technical staff, and who had a committee like IRC. And I was actually working as a consultant for other types of clients within those municipalities. And it was quite often that the really contentious reports would go to that committee because it was seen as like a potentially more, I don't know, you can't really say unbiased, like just another eye on that to help solve some of those issues. So I wonder if that's a potential area. That's all I've got for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Linus.
On the Indigenous consultation, just first, I know there are differences between provinces, from province to province, in terms of the municipalities' duty to consult. And I think here in Alberta, where it's more the good neighbor approach, and so whether we're sending documents off if Treaty 7 members want that, but at least in the advisory group that you have set up as part of the agenda there, sort of giving a heads up about activities going on in the town, that would seem an appropriate good neighbor approach. And so I hope that's happening. And then to the point as to whether the IRC review of EIS is redundant with the third-party reviews that the town is already paying for. We did talk about this a couple of points last year, and I see Bob's got his hand up too. I think the value that we saw as a committee is that that we are locally based and focused, and we were providing both some technical comments and some process suggestions. So I mean, the audience is council. So in terms of whether there is value in the IRC review, I think that's got to be the ultimate body to decide. We did talk, I think, at the last meeting about considering whether instead of just handing off a document to council, whether we should have presentation of the information, or just presentation and discussion with council a couple of times a year to make sure that we have those avenues of communication open, and that if there are environmentally related issues that the committee could help council with, then there'd be more awareness through that kind of dialogue. That's what I wanted to mention.
Thank you. I had Gareth next.
Thanks, Amy. So just a couple of things. It was 1992 is the date. That's so welcome to the 30th consecutive year of EARC in the town of Canmore, and that was then. This is now. So I'm not, frankly, that was, so much has changed, so much water beneath the bridge. So I'm glad we did it, but certainly the EARC needs to stay up to date. And as a new guy, all I wanted to say, I suppose, is I would be, it would from my seat, either just maybe on an offline thing, or perhaps this is committee work, you guys be the judge. But I personally feel the need to review the bylaw to kind of the terms of reference for the EARC and just see in black and white the latest, greatest thing that was passed by a council that says that gives EARC its marching rights. And then, but I'd also like to hear, because things do change, and so much on the environmental front changes quite quickly, climate being one of them, and climate action and so on. We didn't have a declaration of climate emergency until just very recently. And so I personally, as an EARC member, would like to hear recommendations, not only by staff as to what the highest best use of this committee might be, but by EARC members as well, who have all of that experience and have seen some cool stuff come and go, and keeping in mind that it's Jeff that eventually conveys our kind of volition, I suppose, to council, and council gets to hold the pen and say yes or no. So, but I would be interested in that, and I'll just pursue that either independently on my own with Bob, or supported by Amy, or whatever, or maybe it's time to bring it to the committee. You guys be the judge. But anyway, the only last thing I'll say, my poor stepdaughter's natural father just has been in ICU for 3 weeks. Things aren't going swimmingly well. So anyway, I need to say goodbye shortly here and go and support her. So apologies if I wink out here.
Thanks, Gareth. And best of luck to your family. Bob.
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned about even the term redundant for our committee. And I think the value of the committee was quite evident during the review of the Three Sisters EISs. We identified a number of items that the third-party reviewer did not, one of which would have been the lack of First Nations consultation, which actually became quite a fairly big topic during the public consultations, that and among other things. In terms of placing an onerous burden on a committee such as this, I don't think it's onerous. That the Three Sisters EISs were very large, but the chance of those coming up frequently I'd say are fairly minor. And I think if you look at the committee and the qualifications that are sitting in front of you here, I think that it would be detrimental, I think, to council for them to not use the brain trust that this valley has. I'm not just saying this committee, but if you recall the public meetings for the Three Sisters, the incredible expertise in this valley with regards to environmental issues is just phenomenal. I'll bet you there's not a place in Canada that has a concentration of experts such as this town has. And to not use that resource for helping the town to make decisions, I think would be a mistake. I think there are some changes that we could align the bylaw with the EIS policy to make sure that everything is in alignment, and then giving the committee a proper timeline to assess the EISs in an appropriate manner. I know, Whitney, you and I had a discussion last year or the year before about the timelines that we had to review the EIS for Three Sisters. And I think we were able to come to an agreement on that. But I think that, straightening out some of those terms of references and aligning the EIS policies with the bylaw would go a long ways to making sure that this committee stays relevant.
Sorry, Whitney, did you have a response to Bob, or just speak in general?
Yeah, to Bob, and then I think to one of the earlier comments as well. So I think the timeline piece would be like when I reference some belief that IRC is redundant, that is feedback that I've heard from industry. I appreciate that that might not be everybody's view, but I do think that there is overlap there between the town staff we have on well, the town we have, administration we have on staff now, and the third-party reviewer function and IRC. So I do think it makes sense to take a look at the bylaws to see if maybe that there are some different areas of focus that IRC could have. And I would also say with the timelines, I know there was some discussion in one of your previous meetings around expanding the time that the committee has to review the EISs. And I'm fairly certain that that would not fly with industry. So, and I appreciate that industry is one stakeholder, but they are definitely impacted greatly by the current regulations under which IRC does its review. So I do think that that would be a tough sell for industry members, and especially in a time where every time we turn around, we're being told cut red tape, find efficiencies. I don't know that that would go over well. And again, to me, part of that comes back to taking a look at where can IRC provide the greatest value for the town in delivering that mandate and that focus on the importance of environmental issues within the town. So that's kind of where I was coming from with that. And I know the other thing I wanted to say in response to one of Glynis's comments about presentations to council. It could be, I had thought about that a couple times before, that maybe at some point it's worth having a workshop with council. I'm not sure, I'd have to explore that a bit more and talk to Amy and Caitlin about it. I do think on a project by project basis though, that would be a bit challenging just because the EIS is one input in a number of inputs that have to be brought to bear on planning decisions that are either made by administration or by council. So I'm not sure about the practicality of that, but I think if the conversation around the terms of reference progressed, I could see a point where maybe it would be worth a bit of a workshop with council on where can IRC bring the most value in delivering that knowledge to the town, because I completely agree with you, Bob. I do think that there is a lot of expertise on the committee and in the town at large, and that's a gift, and we should use it and treat it as such. So I hope I didn't come across as not respecting that.
Whitney, just what's the timeline that you give the third-party reviewer for reviewing an EIS?
I don't know offhand. I would imagine it would depend on the scope of the terms of reference.
But if the IRC had the same kind of timeline as the third-party reviewer, that wouldn't cause any additional delay on a review.
It would, because it doesn't go to IRC until it's gone through the third-party reviewer, and then the applicant's consultants have made their changes based on the third-party reviewer's comments, and then when that's finalized, then it goes to IRC.
And I think that's where there's a delay that we could probably work to eliminate.
Yeah, so that's the type of thing where I'm saying you take a look at the EIS policy and the IRC terms of reference. We could probably, that's one of the things that I think is worth exploring for sure.
Thanks.
Back over to you, Amy.
I'm sorry.
Back over to you.
Okay. We had Jeff next, and then Ken after him. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, just speaking from my personal counselor experience, I appreciate having a third-party review, but I also really welcome and appreciate the opinions of the citizen groups such as IRC. I do feel having that extra level of backstop, that extra level of insight, and just leveraging the caliber of the citizenry for this stuff, I would welcome that. I think the more information and opinions that can come towards council, especially such an informed opinion of background and information such as the IRC crew, I think that's helpful, and I value that for sure. I'd like to see that continue. Yeah, my thoughts.
Thanks, Jeff. Ken.
Well, thanks, Amy. There's been a lot of comments here, and I have to agree with most of what the members have said. From even Whitney has commented on the value of the committee and people in the community as a whole. And I think that's an excellent resource that we need to be maintaining and looking after. There's so many issues out there, not even the EISs. I'm not sure what the timelines really state in the terms of reference, but there should be a policy or something that gives everybody the opportunity to review that industry does. When I worked in BC and I reviewed a lot of plans, we had a timeline for every step of the way. And we had to stay within those timelines, no matter how small or how big that management plan was. So I'd have to ask Whitney what sort of things are in place around that timelines and those timelines, and maybe work with that to help the IRC committee deal with such major projects as the Three Sisters that we did do, and we had 2 weeks to do it, and we're all volunteers. The other components are there are a lot of value out there and a lot of use by the public, whether it be recreation. I written down a number of things, which impacts wildlife, which impacts habitat, which impacts water quality. It goes on, plus climate change. So the committee here can certainly assist the town in developing some guidelines and policies to work with those components and bring it together into a unified form. So if there's one impacting, say recreational is impacting wildlife, how do we manage that? Those type of things can all come together quite nicely if you're using the expertise that is on this committee and of value. So to me, there's a number of questions, and yes, there could be some overlap, but I think the overlap itself is going to happen no matter what you do. But we're here to make it a success for the community, a success for council, and a success for the committee as a whole. Thank you.
Go ahead, Whitney.
Thanks. Great points, Ken. And it made me think as you were talking. Just last week, I was participating in the Human Wildlife Coexistence Roundtable, right? That could be the work that we do around like the social norms campaign, the wiener dog that was on the screen when I joined the meeting, and just other wildlife management issues related to, or strategies related to that human wildlife coexistence could be a great topic of discussion with IRC, right? And I think that that's coming back to my opening, like where does IRC add the most value? In my experience at the town being here 2 years, the biggest thing I've seen IRC having some hands-on involvement with is the EISs on subdivision and policy applications. So I think it's worth asking the question, where can the value of this committee, because you are all volunteers giving freely of your time and your expertise, and like I said, it is a gift. Where can we best use that gift? Because I'm not sure we're doing that now. And I think that's just where I'm coming to, like part of that comes from the kind of evolution of the EISs and our review of them over time, but then part of it comes down to sustainability and environmental issues are huge in our community, and they should be. And I do think it is worth taking a look at the terms of reference, not from the point of view of beefing up regulation around the review of EISs, but just to say where can this committee and the wisdom of this committee and that lived local experience, in addition to kind of professional backgrounds or whatever, where can that provide the most benefit for the town? Because I'm not sure that I don't know that that question has been asked. Certainly it hasn't in the time that I've been here. And I do feel like you guys got slammed with a lot of EISs over the past couple of years, Three Sisters aside, right? So I do think it's worth asking the question of, is that the best use of your volunteer time? I've been a public servant for many, many years. I've also been a volunteer on many committees over my time. I want my time, when I give freely of my time, I want it to be put to good use and having an effect and having an impact and making a meaningful difference in my community. And I want to make sure that you guys are afforded that same opportunity. So.
Whitney, I agree with what you're saying. I just think we have to sit down as a group with the council or with city, whomever we need to sit down with, and develop something that is going to be useful, functional, and utilize the expertise that is here. And EIS have been just one piece of the puzzle. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of other components that fit into the environment. This is a huge environmental community. They're very sensitive to that. They're very understanding of it. And I think we want to represent that. And it's a matter of how do we do it? And we need to sit down and actually hash it out and come up with some solutions, you know, because you've expressed concerns about redundancy. You've talked about a number of things that are impacting what we do. So where do we go from here? That's the question. And I think the best way is by sitting down, going through the whole process, looking at all the concepts, the ideas, whether it be recreation, climate change, wildlife, whatever, and how do we fit all of that into what we do as a committee?
Yeah, totally agree. And with Caitlin here, right? Not to put you on the spot, Caitlin, but you know, you've got somebody with experience in other municipalities who I think can really, between Caitlin and Amy, and you know, myself, well, less me, but mostly them, I think you're in excellent hands, right? Because you're asking the right questions, Ken. I don't know what the answers are, but I know that we can work together to find those answers. Caitlin, I don't know if you want to jump in because I kind of threw you out there.
Yeah, no, that's okay. This has been a great conversation to listen into and to hear kind of the different perspectives, and definitely, I guess, like reviewing all of this before this meeting, I had some thoughts of is there areas that we could use and use your expertise and your knowledge to better push forward the environmental and the climate action portfolio within the administration. And so I think the questions that Ken, you're asking align very much with sort of the thought process that we're having internally. Is so there's been from my understanding, a strong focus historically on the EIS review, but there's also an environmental sustainability action plan that's over 10 years old now, and it may need an update. And is there support and ability of this group to kind of look at that and see how maybe we develop the environmental mandate for the town for the next 10 years? And so there's a lot of big questions that I think we're at kind of a turning point. I don't know if that's the right word, but where a lot of external and community input will be needed. And I think ERC, from what my understanding of ERC, would really serve that purpose well. And so we were just kind of curious if focusing heavily on EIS was the best use of your time, when we do have some other big questions that will guide the community and how we grow in our environmental lens, that your expertise and knowledge could be used for. And since it's so limited and you're all volunteers, we really want to respect that and not ask too much of you, as Whitney stated before. So those are that was my thoughts initially. And so I don't know if a workshop at a future meeting, or we'll have to talk maybe with Amy and Whitney and then Bob about the process for setting up a workshop, or how that works. I don't know your framework fully in your bylaws of how to set that up, but definitely open to that conversation. I think that would be a good step forward. And I see Jeff, your hand is up, so I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, like I'm just trying to read the temperature of the room here, because we're kind of chugging through the meeting time here, and maybe like ERC members, like please let me know your thoughts and sentiment. I don't get the sense that the ERC members are define like the task of like taking on an EIS review as something that is like, you know, onerous, or like yeah, like it's big, like say the free system, but I don't think it's a sort of like task or skill set that I think that they want to give up. And if anything, I kind of hear a sentiment from the ERC members is that they want to be able to maintain that expertise and just find, you know, more ways to be helpful, as opposed to giving something up and switching over. I could be wrong, but I'm just curious where you guys are at. I do appreciate your guys' inputs. I really do. And I think just as Ken mentioned, you know, like this is a environmentally sensitive place, and more checks and balances, more eyeballs on things, more perspectives when it comes to environmental stuff here in the Bow Valley, I think that's a good thing. that's not for me.
Bob.
Yeah, I'd like to, just say that, in EIS, you're right, Jeff. I don't think that we would want to give up that opportunity. And I think that, the opportunity we had to review the Three Sisters applications, I think was something that all of us were very interested in. And I don't think, it was a lot to go through. And yes, it was onerous to a degree. But I think that we would have all been disappointed had we not been considered, if our opinions or our recommendations had not been considered on such a big project. We're also, in the past, we've actually had monthly meetings canceled because there was nothing for us to do, and at least that was not necessarily the terminology that was used, but nothing had come up in terms of an agenda item. Whereas I think the committee itself can take on projects that we think are important because we are to advise and recommend to council. We don't necessarily need the questions to be asked by council to provide recommendations to them. So I think we can take a little bit of initiative on our own, in addition to questions that are requested of us as well. And so there's a whole mix of things that the committee can do. And I think, except for the EISs, I think in reality, we have been underutilized in many ways.
Great. We have 11 minutes left, and I do want to talk about the next meeting. And I mean, this is a start of a conversation. We're not cutting it off right now. So Waverly and Ken have their hands up, so we'll let them go. And then I think what I propose is that we schedule the next meeting and then use this to feed into what that agenda is, because I think we want to carry on this conversation and what points we want to cover and what we want to think about in the meantime. So we'll go Waverly and Ken, and then plan for the continuation of this conversation for our March meeting. If that sounds okay with everybody.
Just really quick, I guess my point or comment here would be that where I've seen these committees work elsewhere, perhaps the members weren't expected to go through an EIS like line by line in the same way that staff were, in your case, the third party review would, to ensure that it lines up with the terms of reference and all those little details. But where you get the real value, and what I've heard from other people here, despite being a newer member to this committee specifically, is those pieces of expertise that you might not get from your third party review. And I think there's a lot of value in that.
So really, Ken.
Yeah, I'm just going to make it short and sweet here. Just to add on to a workshop. Part of that workshop, I think, should be getting into the field and discussing a couple of things that are on the agenda. I actually had a field trip with Stu, who's the fire protection guru and tennis consultant. And I went and saw what the city was doing in relation to fire management. And I was quite impressed with what I saw, and I saw the difficulties and the issues surrounding that. So it's really good to go kick the dirt, and that's where I come from. So just an additional.
Thank you. Okay, so I know it's a big conversation, and I think it's important, and it's only the start. So I think we had proposed March 14th as a kind of a tentative next meeting, potentially at the same time. So I'll just throw it out to everybody right now to see initial thoughts on that and if that would work. So it's the second Monday in March. I see nods, people checking schedules. Okay.
Looks good for me.
Was that that was good, Kevin? Okay, awesome. So I think, and shall we just leave the agenda fairly open and focus on this and kind of next steps? I don't know right now what kind of structure to put to that, but just leaving that a little bit open for this. And, we have some time because we can't move forward on any of these proposed changes at this time. And I can talk maybe next time a little bit about some of the risks of opening up the EIS policy at this time with respect to some of the climate change work and concerns there. So I can talk about that specifically, and then some other options, like, so how do we kind of take what everybody said today and kind of move forward with some more structure, or what that would look like in terms of the terms of reference. Yeah, I don't know, what do you guys think?
I think we need to keep this thing front and center. It's been on our radar for a year now. So I think the sooner we get after this, the better we can start resolving or identifying some of the opportunities that we have going forward. I think we're starting to build up a bunch of different ideas. So I think we're going to have a busy year with a number of initiatives we've already talked about. But I think this one's important.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Ken.
Just a quick question. If all the restrictions come off by government, is there an opportunity to have a face-to-face? Because I find that's much better when we can sit down in a forum to communicate and bring ideas forward.
Whitney, do you know? Like, do you and Jeff know? Like, are we just waiting for the provincial government and then whatever they say will go? I mean, we always did meet in person previously, and that was how we even bought you guys pizza. And that's how we, used to run it before COVID. So I think that is the intention of, once things are safe, we can go back to that. But yeah, do you guys have any indication?
Yep, no, I think it's the Premier has said this week he's going to make an announcement about gradual relaxation of restrictions, but I would hope if my preference is always for face-to-face, because it's hard to eat pizza on a Zoom meeting. But I think, if we have the opportunity to meet face-to-face, I think we should definitely take that, because I agree it's hard to have a free-flowing discussion with people putting up their little orange hand and forgetting to unmute. So with you on that.
Well, I'm just gonna park my truck outside of the town hall until you guys get rid of the mandates.
Oh no. Too soon. Don't go there.
And I'm gonna honk my horn.
Waverly.
If I could just ask that maybe that decision goes to the committee rather than just following the province's guidelines. I personally have not always been comfortable with the province's guidelines.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah, thank you for bravely putting that forward. So I think what we would do is I propose, and Caitlin, I guess this will ultimately be your decision, but we could just send out an email and ask people to let us know their comfort. And if people aren't feeling, and we would, respect that you could get back to us individually and privately. And if people are feeling uncomfortable, we won't make everybody do that. If that sounds fair.
There's the opportunity to have a combined meeting, part Zoom, part in person as well.
Yes, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Whitney, see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So I was just going to say, in terms of the kind of broader discussion, workshop-y type discussion, I'm more than happy to attend when I'm available. I think the benefit of that is just looking at being able to bring different perspectives to the conversation. Like, some of my comments today are really influenced just from what I've heard from people in the development industry and stuff like that. So, I want to see, like I've said a couple times now, I want to see this group be able to bring its wisdom and help the town have better policies in place or make better decisions. And I just want to make sure that we are doing that in a way that balances inputs across a number of different specialties. So I'm happy to come to this committee when needed and when I'm available to just help out with that conversation. That was all.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, excuse me, I was just going to follow up with Ken's a statement about getting out and kicking the dirt. Well, when things warm up a bit, that's what we can do. Get together and go out and see some more pictures of wiener dogs. That's all I had.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, well we're at 5:58. So shall we table it and say to be continued, March 14th?
Sure.
Sounds good.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Also move.
Okay, okay. Thanks, everybody. Great discussion.
Thank you.
Everybody, take
Thank
care.
you. Have a good
It
night.
was
Thanks,
nice
everyone.
meeting you
Next
all.
month. Okay. Bye now.
Good night,
Night.
everyone.
Good night.